In today's video, we're discussing all the latest trade talk around the league. We're now less than 2 weeks away from the NHL trade deadline. Today's latest rumors include updates on teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Boston Bruins, New York Islanders, and Philadelphia Flyers. There'll be lots of goalie trade talk today as well. The Fire Lindy Chants in the Devils Arena have returned. A lot of fans upset and disappointed in a lackluster season with New Jersey. We have more news from the waiver wire. Of course, it's a big night in Chicago for the Chelios retirement and Patrick Kane return. All that and injury updates coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. First up, let's get started with news from the NHL waiver wire. Colorado Avalanche had forward Frederick Olofsson on waivers yesterday. He, in fact, has cleared, so he was not picked up and can be reassigned to the American Hockey League. Of course, like I said, it's a big night in Chicago. The game is well underway, and at this point, as I record this video, but the Chelios retirement ceremony was pre-game tonight. Of course, it's also coincides with the return of Patrick Kane to Chicago in the United Center. Obviously, it's a big night. Lots of emotions, I'm sure, for Blackhawks fans getting to see number 7 go up into the rafters. Chelios was a long time Blackhawk who had a lot of success, wore the C, and did a lot for the team and the community. Played well into his later years, of course, had strong connections with the Red Wings as well. So it's fitting that they were the team in town to partake with this special night. And of course, Patrick Kane, one of the greatest American-born players of all time, if not the greatest at this point. I know Austin Matthews will likely take that title down the road, but for right now, Kane, I think it's fair to say, has that title, and arguably one of, if not the greatest Blackhawk of all time. Makes his triumphant return to the United Center in Chicago, of course, after he was traded last year at the deadline to the Rangers, brought an end to an era. A lot of success during his time there, drafted first overall, Stanley Cups, all kinds of success. Never had a chance to return as a Ranger last year. Come back later into this year after recovering from hip surgery and is signed with the Detroit Red Wings. So certainly, another original 6 team for him to be around. Of course, that's the only teams he's been with now, all original 6. But Patrick Kane has a new home in Detroit and had a tremendous ovation. He had to end up doing, I think, 3 laps around the rink. The fans were just wouldn't stop cheering for him. So obviously lots of love for those two guys, and Chelios and Kane. Chelios was asked about the other great number 7, Brent Seabrook, who obviously was able to wear the number for a long stretch and had a long, successful career of his own because the number was not retired when he arrived. It was asked about the possibility if the Blackhawks ever wanted to consider retiring the number again. Obviously, nobody else can ever wear 7 moving forward, but he said it would be really cool and something he'd be quite happy to have a rafter or another banner raised to the rafter, to hang next to his with another number 7. He thought that would be really cool, and another great defenseman who had a long career, well deserving. So we'll see if the Blackhawks ever do that down the road. Lots of alumni on hand as well for this special ceremony, and it was a great evening at the United Center. Some other updates around the league, including some roster moves and injury updates. Vancouver reassigned defenseman Jet Wu back to the American Hockey League. The Leafs sent defenseman Max Lajoie back to the American Hockey League. And the Dallas Stars sent Derek Pouliot and Logan Stankoven back to the AHL as well. We saw quite a battle today between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia in the Battle of Pennsylvania, ending up with a 7-6 win. Not what you were expecting at all. But both teams suffered some injuries that could be pretty significant. The Pittsburgh Penguins lost Brian Russ. He was injured today. As of the post-game interviews and talk from the team and coaching staff, Mike Sullivan mentioned he was being evaluated, and it is possible that Russ may not head out with them on their upcoming road trip. Difficult to say right now. We'll have to see where things go. And in Philly side of things, Jamie Drysdale, young defenseman who they recently acquired in a big trade with the Anaheim Ducks, was hurt. Took a huge hit from Jansen Harkins, and it didn't look good. It looked like it was a shoulder injury as he went off the ice. No back, and I think it was 2022, about 2 years ago. He had another bad injury while with the Anaheim Ducks. It turned out to be a torn labrum, and he had like a 6-month recovery, and he had like that dead arm type of syndrome after the hit, and he looked the same going off. So we got a lot of people talking that, wondering, is it the same type of injury? Because it's a huge recovery. It's a really tough thing to recover from. So obviously to have, multiple devastating injuries like that in his young career could really set back his development and could really have a major impact on him, as a player. So we certainly hope that the case of Drysdale is not as severe as it possibly looks. And we'll see if he can hopefully make a speedy recovery instead of being out for an extended several months period of time. We'll see. Of course, the Devils, we know they've been having a tough season, currently sitting outside the playoffs. Not a team that's a lot of people predicted to be where they are. I know myself when I was doing my predictions before the season, and you're always getting bound to have enough of them that are incorrect. It's really, really tough to make predictions and be very accurate. That's why we only do it for fun and don't claim to be have any kind of special wisdom and powers to see, through the crystal ball here. But the Devils are a team that after last year, a lot of us thought would be more of a contending team this year. And they've taken a major step backwards. Now, of course, injuries have played a role in that as well. I know the decor has been banged up and I've had a lot of man games lost, and that's played a big role. They haven't gotten the goaltending. That's also played a big role as well. And today, against their game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they lost 4-1, the chants that we heard at the beginning, I think it was beginning of last season, of Fire Lindy, have returned. So a lot of fans are getting frustrated. A lot of fans are getting fed up. And we'll see if we see something, soon in terms of change. I mean, GM Tom Fitzgerald hasn't really done a whole lot. There's all kinds of rumors and speculation around the Devils and things they've been looking at and thinking about leading towards the trade deadline. But, you would think that they're a team that might not want to wait until the last second at the deadline, because you don't often see teams that are, 7, 8, 9, 10 points out are not usually buyers, because that might not seem like a lot. You might be confident you can go on a run, but typically around the deadline, you only have around 20 games left thereabouts, and there's not a lot of runway. You might think that even if you win 15 out of 20 games, but if you have enough teams to pass and enough points to catch up, you got to realize these teams in front of you are not going to lose every single game either, right? So it's really, really, really tough. Like I was saying before, some teams that are looking to do a miracle run, like I know in the case of the Senators, are looking for another Hamburglar 2.0, where they, end up winning, maybe 21 of their last 25 games. But even then, it's not a guarantee. Like, that's how high of a winning percentage you need to have down the stretch when you're that far out to stand a chance and make up that ground. It might not seem like it, but it's really hard. So if this team is going to be able to right the ship and go on a run, they need to have as much runway as possible, which is why I'm surprised that we haven't seen something more significant happen before now. Obviously, like last year, a lot of us really were surprised at how strong the Devils were. It was a case where they were expected to be better. I thought they'd be better, but they were even way ahead of what I thought they'd be. And now this year you think, okay, well, they showed they could do it for an entire season last year. They should be able to sustain some of that, and then they've taken steps back. But like I said, injuries have played a role, but it's not all of the case of it. It's not entirely based on injuries. So we'll see what happens. But the fans are getting frustrated in New Jersey, and I would think that the GM would be acting sooner than later to try to give their team more runway to get back in if they're going to make a move from a buyer perspective. Maybe they're going to take a different approach. We'll have to wait and see on that. On to the rumor section of the video. There was one rumor that I came across, and it really didn't seem to have much substance. It really, when I first seen it, didn't think anything of it. But I've seen some other people talking about it, so I just wanted to address it on here. There was Spit and Chicklets podcast co-host Ryan Whitney, of course, former NHL player, had mentioned on Twitter that the Chiclet Rumor Boys, as they like to be called, which is Murley and Armstrong, apparently had some intel, because he was talking about the Senators, and he was saying how that they could move Brady Tkachuk, but he didn't think they'd be that stupid, so he didn't know that it would be something that would be really, entertained. There's no chance of that happening. I just seen other people addressing it, and seen other topics popping up going, oh, could Brady Tkachuk be available? Based on comments from new GM Steve Staios and what we've heard from the owner Michael Andlauer after taking over this team, they absolutely love and adore this guy. Yes, it's been frustrating that they've didn't make the progress this year that they were hoping to. I think the only way Brady Tkachuk would ever be moved is if he went to them and said, I don't want to be here anymore. And there's no reason to think that that's anywhere near happening. So, in all honesty, I don't think that's the case. I know recent comments from Steve Staios in an interview made mention that Brady is one of those leaders that's almost like a once in a generation that you get a chance to draft. If you look around the NHL and you look at the teams that have these, guys that we're not necessarily talking just the elite players, like the top scoring guys of the league, because they don't all have the same skill set. They don't all have the same personality and leadership qualities. But if you just take a look at some of the best leaders, guys that have that good combination of drive, skill, and leadership, they're really, really hard to get. When teams get those guys, they never want to give them up because they're such phenomenal, components to their team and franchise building blocks. So they don't want to move them. So you can't get them through trade. It's almost extremely rare. So unless you get a chance to draft somebody like that, you're not getting them. Anyways, I really don't think there's anything to that. I really just think that Whitney was trying to get the fans riled up, and it clearly worked because it's gotten the attention of enough people who have then written articles or made other videos about it. And I just wanted to give my 2 cents on it. There's absolutely nothing to that. I mean, if any GM has to do their job properly and listen, if a team call Steve Staios and be like, hey, so that Brady Tkachuk, he's a pretty awesome guy. What would you want for him? Are they going to do that once in a while? I wouldn't have any doubts because I'm sure there's 31 other teams that would love to have him on their team. And do they have to entertain themselves and listen? If they're not listening, they're not doing their job. Doesn't mean they have any kind of seriousness around wanting to do something. So to me, that's not something we're going to see, but it's out there, so I wanted to bring it up. In Philadelphia, there's obviously lots of rumors around the Flyers. We don't know exactly what their approach is going to be because they are, sitting in a spot where they have a good chance to make the playoffs right now. They also have some pending UFAs and a new GM, Danny Briere, who's made it clear that his main vision is to build for the future as much as they want to get in the playoffs, that they can't lose opportunities to get good building blocks for the team down the road. And they have a couple of pending guys in Sealer and Walker on the back end that are needing new contracts. They've played well this year. They're getting a lot of attention. And according to some sources like Elliot Friedman and Anthony DeMarco of fourthperiod.com, they both have said that there is some intel out there suggesting that there's at least a couple of teams that have called to inquire about trading for them as a package, as a pair, because they have played together and it would be an easy plug into your blue line if you bring them both over. Anthony DeMarco has made it known that according to his sources, the approximate asking price to do such a deal would be a first and second round pick. So we'll see if teams do that. One team that's been expected to be one of the ones that have asked about that was the Dallas Stars. That's not confirmed, but that's the belief out there right now. And there's definitely a few others, but I'm not sure who those are. So the Flyers could also keep some of these guys, like those 2 defensemen, as their own rentals if they want to. I don't know that they're going to want to have multiple own rentals though going into the playoffs and have these guys possibly walk in the offseason for nothing. I think that they're bound to either get a contract done here soon or make a trade. So we'll see. And obviously the Drysdale injury that we talked about today could also impact things too, at least for the current season. So yeah, could they be moved as a pair? It's possible. Teams have been asking. On the Islanders, there's speculation kind of picking up around them as they've obviously, another team like the Devils that are sitting on the outside of the playoffs and right now are, still trying to push forward to get in, but they have a tough task in front of them. They've seen some ups and downs with new head coach Patrick Waugh, and obviously you have to think that this roster needs change. A lot of people have been saying it for, more than a year, probably going on 2. And Lou Lamoriello, for the most part, hasn't done much. But right now, there's speculation picking up that they may have to go and may not have a choice if they're getting that far out of the playoffs. Depending on how the next stretch of games go, that you could get some players like, for example, a Brock Nelson would be getting some attention. That's a name that's been out there in the rumor mill that teams are starting to ask about. He's got this year and 1 more year left. Reasonable contract, good size, Lots of experience, lots of playoff action under his belt, a good goal scorer, can play center, can play wing, good versatility. There's lots to like, in my opinion, about Brock Nelson, and I think they could get themselves a good haul. So as much as he's a good player and they, don't absolutely want to move him, they need to start working towards getting younger, getting more skilled, and changing the mix on this team. And you have to move something of value to do that. There's other players that could go, like a Wallstrom. I've heard Pageau's name being out there, potential. His contract's tougher to move, in my opinion. So a guy like Nelson would have more value. Paul Mary's name has been out there a little bit too. I don't know that he's going to have as much value as Nelson either, though. So we'll see. They may not do a lot because they keep making comments that they very much believe in this group, which is, I guess from a PR perspective, not a bad thing to keep building confidence in your team, but at the same time, they have to make some changes. It's been way too long now that this team has been mediocre, and we've been clamoring for Lou to make changes, and it hasn't happened. So it's got to come at some point, you'd think, right? And in Carolina, expect them to jump into the already busy goaltender trade market that's going to lead up to the trade deadline. They're expected to have Freddie Anderson back shortly. They've already got Ranta. They still have Tkachuk and Spencer Martin, who's all been good for them. So they can't have 4 goalies. Having 3 is tough enough. So I'm not sure who will go. I would suspect it would either be Martin or Ranta. Ranta might be their first choice. Martin's actually been pretty good for them since he's come over. So tough to say exactly what they do, but there's going to be a goalie there that's going to be available for trade and likely here in the next couple of weeks. So they'll certainly, add to I wouldn't call it a super busy goalie trade market, but we've already heard about a few, and we're going to talk about a few more here in a moment, including the Boston Bruins, who Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick were talking about in the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, and on the Jeff Merrick show recently about Linus Ullmark's name continues to be out there, surprisingly, for the Boston Bruins. We know the Bruins are a team that's definitely would like to add. They've had a strong regular season, but they're still, by the experts and the reporters out there covering this team, think there's some holes that the Bruins should address. But the asking prices are really going to play a big role in what they do at the end of the day. If they have to spend too much, it may not be worth it. They may be better off to stand pat and go with what they have, which has brought them success all season long. But Ullmark's name has been out there of a player that they have with value. They obviously have a terrific goalie tandem. As I mentioned before, they're going to be very, very careful with this. Clearly, having a strong goalie tandem like they have is a luxury, and a luxury that they may feel, according to some, that they just can't afford to keep anymore. They need to add value in other areas, like on the blue line and down the middle at center position. And trading a guy like Ullmark would probably get you a good haul in return to help accomplish that. He also has a modified no-trade clause, which could complicate things as well. So it's really hard to say if this is something that really comes to be or not. I'm not entirely convinced it's something that they really want to do. But if you look at their options for trading to make additions at the deadline, this team is not going to be moving probably much in the way of draft capital this year. They do have some players that could go, and Ullmark is one of them that would kind of make sense. At some point, one of these goalies have to go, and it's expected to be Ullmark given the fact that Swayman is a bit younger. So I don't know. It's a tough call here, but I'm sure Ullmark's name is going to be out there and speculation is going to pick up leading to the deadline. I won't be shocked, though, if they find other ways to make moves and keep the goalie tandem in check. And in Pittsburgh, of course, we know that Kyle Dubas is going to have some awfully tough decisions to make here leading to the deadline as well. Jake Gensel's a name that gets by far the most attention, but also a word out of Pittsburgh, according to Friedman as well, is that they're likely, if they do end up going into sell mode, that expect a goalie to move. And it could end up being Alex Nedeljkovic, who's been pretty good for the Penguins, but he didn't necessarily rule out a Tristan Jarry trade. We already know there's some other names out there on the market. We know, obviously, John Gibson's name has been out there for some time. We know UC Saros' name has been out there now a lot lately. We've heard a lot about Jacob Markstrom out of Calgary. I don't know if they would trade Jerry, but I'm not sure that they're also opposed to it. I think it really boils down to the interest and the offers that come along. But knowing that they have two goalies, in the case of Nedeljkovic, not signed for a longer term, that's why I feel he's the more likely guy to go. He could also be a goalie that might be less expensive for teams to acquire than one of those more experienced starting goaltenders that we mentioned, and he could still provide good depth and be a good pickup here for the deadline. So the Penguins are going to be a busy team. They can move a goalie, they can move Gensel, they can move Riley Smith. I wouldn't rule out other moves too outside of their top core players. If they do go down the road of maybe moving Karlsson again, that's something I believe would be more so in the summertime. But we'll see. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks leading to the trade deadline. Let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.